Hi, my name is Ali Shirsavar from Biricha Digital. In some of our previous videos, we discussed peak current mode control, and we discussed that in order to get rid of subharmonic oscillations, we add a compensating ramp. In this video, we're going to talk about what happens to our phase margin and stability if we add too much ramp and how we go about fixing this problem. So, as we discussed in other videos, subharmonic oscillations can happen in a peak current mode controller, and we add a compensating ramp in order to get rid of these subharmonic oscillations. Now, in the old days, with older chips, we had to calculate the size of this compensating ramp and manually add it on top of our current sense signal. And there are many ways of doing it, and you can find it very easily on the internet how we manually add the compensating ramp. However, on new chips and modern ICs, this ramp is added internally and automatically by the IC chip, by your IC. The good news of this is that you don't have to worry about it because they're adding it internally. You don't need any extra circuitry and so on. The bad news is that, well, you don't have any control over it. And if the size of the ramp that they're adding is correct, then great. But if it's too little or too much, then we may have issues. We know that if we add too little ramp, we're going to get subharmonic oscillations. And that is obvious when you design it, and you'll see that too little ramp is being added. That is actually very rarely the case because modern ICs opt for being conservative, add too much ramp as opposed to too little ramp. But what happens if we add too much ramp? Well, we know that if you add too much ramp, the behavior of a current mode controller starts looking like voltage mode. We have got another video whereby we explain why this phenomena happens. But for now, we know, let's just assume that we know that if we add too much ramp, a current mode controller starts to look like voltage mode. Now, the frequency response of the plant of the voltage mode controller looks something like this. You've got here your frequency, you've got here your gain, and then you've got a double pole, that is the LC of the converter, and which will have after it a 40 dB per decade fall. And then it will go like so, and then you base your compensator around it. The other thing that happens at this point is that the phase, again, this is your frequency, you lose 180 degrees of phase. So this from there to there is minus 180 degrees. With voltage mode, we use a type 3 compensator and we give it a phase boost so that it doesn't go unstable. Now, if you look at the current mode controller, let me use a different color. With a current mode controller, again, we have got frequency, we have got gain. However, this time, because the inductor has gone out of the picture, first of all, it's not a double pole system. It looks like a single pole. Therefore, you have no bump, and it's shallow at 20 dB per decade. And most importantly, your phase is from there to there is only minus 90 degrees. We propose that if we add too much ramp, beg your pardon, we propose that if we add too much ramp, this is starting to look like that. So two things is going to happen. One, instead of going at 20 dB per decade, it's going to go at 40 dB per decade. That will make your slope at crossover frequency too sharp, and also it will make the crossover frequency lower than you expect. But the other thing that can happen is that you have allowed for 90 degrees of phase loss. If it's starting to look like that, you're going to lose 180 degrees or approach to losing 180 degrees, and therefore you end up with a lot less phase margin than you expect. The fix for this is to, instead of using a type 2 compensator, we use a type 3 compensator. You can very easily find a circuit of that on the internet, but a type 2 for now quickly looks like something like this, and type 3 has just got an extra capacitor and extra resistor here, right? So if you end up with a chip that is adding too much ramp and you need to give yourself a phase boost, then what I recommend you do is you put the footprint of these two on your PCB at design time, and then when you measure the loop and you find that you don't have as much phase, then you just solder these in order to give yourself a phase boost. So now let's go to the lab and let's measure this on a controller, and we add too much ramp and see whether this actually happens or not. So here we are in the lab, and I've got my current mode power supply here, and I'm measuring the frequency response with my Bodhi 100, and here you can see the loop response. At the moment I have got a crossover frequency of around 19 kilohertz and a phase margin of 50 degrees. You can see from this resonance pump here that I'm actually adding very little ramp, and we've discussed this in another video. Now, if I increase the amount of ramp, then I will damp this, and that is a good thing because it stops subharmonic oscillations. But if I add too much ramp, then I expect this slope to sharpen, just like in voltage mode, and I expect more than 90 degrees of phase loss, as we discussed. So I expect my phase margin to get a lot lower. I'm going to do a massive increase in the amount of ramp now, just to show you the contrast, and then I'll do one in the middle. So for now, let me save this trace here. I've saved that. Now I'm going to add a whole lot of ramp, and let's see what happens. You can see that the phase is just collapsing, right? And then after crossover frequency, you can see that this rate of slope is increasing just as we expected. So let me look at the crossover frequency and the phase margin again. You can see that now our crossover frequency is around 15 kilohertz, but our phase margin has gone down to around 18 degrees from around 50 degrees. And of course, that is the impact of adding too much ramp, and things are starting to look like voltage mode, just like we discussed earlier. We've got another video whereby we describe why this happens. For now, if you want to solve this issue, then I propose that you put the footprint of a type 3 compensator so that you can give yourself a phase boost, or if you can, you reduce the amount of ramp, which is what I'm doing at the moment. And you can see that as I reduce the amount of ramp, my phase gets better. And you're going to see now that the amount of ramp that I'm adding is somewhere between too much and too little. You can see a little bit of bump here. You can see that the phase roll-off is shallow. So I'm adding somewhere in the middle of the two extremes that I showed you earlier on. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you at one of our workshops.